We are going to be looking at metaphors now. Again, if you've been watching some of the other figurative language toolkit pieces, these are things that are probably pretty familiar to you guys. You've heard these words probably all throughout your schooling. So we're just going to do a quick run through just to remind you what they are so you can go ahead and get those definitions down in case some of them get confused. And metaphor is one that we do confuse a little bit with similes, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So a metaphor is a direct comparison of two unlike things. So much like a simile, they are comparing two unlike things. So the difference that you need to remember is that similes use those words like or as, whereas metaphor is directly saying those two things are one another. So here you're looking at an example that says basically the same thing. In the metaphor version, we've got she is a snail versus she is as slow as a snail. So here we are saying she is a snail, being very, very literal there, which obviously you can put a picture in your mind of what that looks like, versus she is slow as a snail. They serve the same purpose. It's just a matter of choice as far as how the author wants to do it. And sometimes you're looking at the tone of the piece, which one really fits better with what you're saying. So now we are going to look at how we are going to go about writing that metaphor. The first thing I want you to do is think about that object you want to describe to somebody that's reading your piece. So that could be the character, that could be a setting, it could really be anything that's going on in the story. The next thing you'll do is you'll think about a characteristic of that object that you wanted to describe to your reader, but in a more colorful or visual way. So the one we just looked at a second ago, you could have said she's slow, but that's kind of boring. So if you want to be a little more interesting, especially if you've used some very general descriptions in your writing previously, now might be the time to throw in something a little more colorful. And that's when you might say, instead of she's slow, you might say she's a snail. So that then after you've decided what characteristic it is you want to describe about that object, you're going to think about another object that has the same characteristic you are trying to describe. And then you're going to write your sentence above saying that that first object is the second object. So here's an example. The object I want to describe is hanging out with my best friend since kindergarten. So this is somebody I've known forever, just love being with them, always feel at home with them. And so I'm wanting to describe how comfortable we are together. So then I think about what's something that's super comfortable, that I love being around, that it doesn't matter who I am, that's where I want to be. I thought about my favorite sweatshirt. So instead of just saying, I love hanging out with my best friend, or I'm always comfortable with my best friend, you could say, hanging out with Amy is wearing my deep blue fleece hoodie on a cool day. So then you get a little bit better picture of what that is, and it's just a more visual and colorful way to say the same thing. And again, look, we're not saying it's like something, we're saying it is something, so that makes the difference between that simile and the metaphor.